Well, good morning everybody. Welcome back to Shutters and Speed. You join me on this very wet Monday morning in early April, and you may be wondering why the hell I'm off out in this sort of weather on a Monday morning. No, we're not going on another tour, but we are going to have this machine retuned. So let's run the titles and I'll tell you all about it. Yeah, so we're going to make our way to Peterborough this morning, and we're going to visit BSD Engineering. I'm going to have this machine remapped. It's the third stage really of the improvements that I wanted to make to the bike over time. I've already had I've changed the tyres, which is one of the three things that none other than MCN Maestro Michael Neve said that this bike needed to make it perfect. So I've done that. I've attended to the suspension issues. A link to that video will come up about here somewhere if you want to have a look at that. This is the final sort of stage really, and it'll be very interesting to see how we get on today. I'm hoping that obviously the thing will be improved. I mean, there are one or two problems. It's not that bad, but I thought for the amount of money it costs, it might be well worth sort of trying to get it to pretty much how Yamaha intended. So we'll see how we get on. So we're going to go to BSD and see what they've got to say and what they'll do to the bike. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to film anything. Very similar to the suspension video. I haven't actually made contact with them as such to see whether they would be happy for me to film anything. So if there is any footage, obviously that will come up later. But we'll get there, make our way there, and see how we get on. So here we are driving along the A1122 between Downham Market and Wisbech, and as you can see here, one of the unique features of driving or riding here in the Fens is situations like this where you've got a very narrow strip or bank between the road and the river, and it wouldn't take much of an error of judgment here for you to end up in the drink, as it were. I know when Mrs. Shutters drives along here, she always gets a bit of the heebie-jeebies. And obviously, you know, especially on these bends, if someone's coming towards you on the wrong side of the road, it would be quite easy for you to take an early bath, as it were. Yep, so after a very wet hour's ride from Downham Market here to Eye, which is just on the outskirts of Peterborough, we're now approaching BSD's premises. It's in the sort of the middle of a residential area, actually, which I found quite surprising. But here we are, turning into their driveway, and up ahead is their workshop complex, and so I can't wait to get the bike inside and see what happens. That'll be very interesting to see. So thanks to BSD, because they were more than happy for me to video both inside the dyno room here, where Andy has taken the bike through its paces, as it were. And what I would do if I were you is grab yourself a coffee, because at the end of this sequence we will have a really good insight by Andy into the world of mapping and flashing and ECU jiggery pokery. Right, so we're here with Andy. We've just done a few. He's just done a few runs on this beast, so he's now going to hopefully talk us through what's been done. So over to you, Andy.
Yeah, right. So the first things first, some of the setting changes we've made on the bike. So we've disabled the top speed limiter. So there's no longer a speed limiter as such.
Yep.
The pair system's been disabled, so that's just an air bleed that goes straight from the airbox into the exhaust ports to work with the to clean up the emissions. Now, for dyno purposes, that's all got to be switched off.
Right.
Because obviously we're measuring that air-fuel ratio and it's giving it fresh air and spiking the readings. That's disabled for the time being.
Right.
Also, the standard O2 sensor closed loop system, that's switched off.
Right.
Now that's that narrowband sensor in the exhaust. What that's doing is trying to read the fueling at a very lean tolerance, and the ECU's got a program which basically, as you're going along, it will start subtracting fuel until that lambda sensor in the exhaust tells it it's going too lean.
Right, okay.
And at that point, it knows that it's reached the limit to how much fuel can be removed. So that system's switched off, and now we have full control of the fuel. And so as you ride down the road, it's not going to be trying to lean itself out anymore. The fuel cut is on. It's something to do with a closed throttle. So when you shut the throttle on the bike, down to about 2,000 revs when you're in gear, it will disable the fuel injection system. So you shut the throttle and it's taking all the fuel, it's basically turning the ignition off. So you've got no fuel running into the engine. So what that causes is quite an aggressive deceleration. And obviously a bit of a switch on point as you open the throttle. So that's just switched off. So as you shut the throttle now, you've still got the engine ticking over. So it's a lot sweeter when you start to open the throttle. The other thing which is temporary as well is the fault code for the front wheel speed sensor.
Right.
That's only for the dyno, so obviously the rear wheel's going around but not the front wheel, and the bike soon picks up on that and it throws it into a fault mode, and so that's switched off. And we switch that back on when you go back out on the road. Then the final setting change we've made is to the fan temperature. So that is going to come on, as opposed to coming on 105 degrees and switching off at 100, it now comes on at 100 degrees. Because the reason they tend to put it quite high on these bikes, because that setting is put in all the ECUs around the world, so it doesn't matter if you're in a hot country or cold country. The engines themselves will run safely up to about 110, 115 degrees because it's a pressurised cooling system. But in this country, we're not. You can get away with dropping that down to 100 degrees, even further. If you're in a hot country, say you're in Italy in the middle of summer, whether you get air temperatures up to sort of 35 degrees all day, every day, the engines will run about 100 degrees all day long. So if you've got the fan temperature come down to about 100 degrees, it's going to leave the fan running constantly, even when you're running the bike. In this country, you can get away with it, and then you can get to all where we're going to go, and it's not going to be running that fan constantly winding itself out. So you can drop it all the way down to sort of something like 85 degrees, but 100 degrees is plenty. So yeah, other than that, right, the first things first, what we do on these bikes, there is all sorts of changes we make to the throttle maps, mainly on these to the opening and closing point of the throttle to smooth it all out. You've got a throttle map for each gear, first gear, second gear, third gear, and one in gear 0, which is neutral and clutch. So when you pull the clutch in and when you put it into neutral, again, it's got its own set of maps that it runs. And then you've got one for each mode, standard, A, B. It's changing all of them. But the main area of concern with these, the earlier MT-09s were terrible. We had to change all the throttle maps. These ones, they've sorted it out quite a bit, but the big bugbear is how the throttle opens and closes on that initial pickup, and that's what we adjust mainly on them. So that's been adjusted. The ignition timings have slightly been changed in areas. Nothing, again, the later ones are a lot sweeter, a lot better, and there's not a great deal of change to be made. The blue's where we've increased it, the red's where it's been decreased, and there's nothing really major in there that's worth talking about. It's just generally smoothed out and made better. But the biggest changes, especially on your bike, has been the fuel tables. So this is one of them. You've got two fuel tables, and I'll tell you the difference. There's this one which works on air pressure. So this is predominantly used for small throttle openings. Anything under sort of on one of these below 20% throttle. And what it does, it works on air pressure. So that's manifold air pressure across the top, that scale. Over here is sort of a fully closed throttle maximum vacuum reading, and over here is sort of more towards atmospheric pressure. So as you whack the throttle open, you come over here. As you shut the throttle, it rapidly goes over here.
Right.
And that scale here is RPM. So if you start off at idle, you'll perhaps be sitting around here, and as you pull away, you'll go over here, and then you'll start to cruise, and it'll be over here. Again, the blue is where we've increased fuel. The red's where it's been just taken out.
Right. Okay.
So you can see there's changes. Here is pretty much on a fully closed throttle. This area here, this thick blue bit. But cruising is more over here. Accelerating, you'll come over here, and you don't really use this area of the map because that's you start to get past that 20% throttle boundary, and you switch over to the other map. But you can see all these areas. I'll put that into percentage trims. These numbers now, what they're reading is percentage of change. So where you see this 16, that means a 16% increase of fuel in that area, and anything over sort of 6 or 7% is in the realms of what you're going to begin to notice. Anything below 5%, to be honest, is you wouldn't be able to tell the difference on the road. But anything above 10% is a really quite a noticeable difference. 15, 16, 20%. That's the difference between it sort of stumbling and just pulling cleanly away.
Right. Okay. And that's what we want, don't we?
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, you can see no matter where you are, it's had changes. So every area when you're riding this on the road, we actually, to do this map, we have literally a computer program which reads the fueling, and it's super quick. So as you're riding it, it's populating all these cells, and it's taking a sample of what the fueling is in the exhaust and going, right, that needs to be about plus 10%, and we keep riding it and riding it, so you can roll off, roll on, like you would on the road, and it populates all this and it fills it out quite nicely. So it doesn't matter where you are, each cell is perfectly set up, so it doesn't matter if you're cruising, accelerating, it's going to be spot on. And then you've got this table, which is again RPM down the side, but now throttle position opening. So this is what you're actually getting as opposed to what you're asking for on the handlebar. And then you can see there's two main really regions of this. It's this blue block here, which is where it's fuel's added in. And what's good is you can actually see here against throttle position where you are on the throttle to what you're going to be feeling. So it's mainly around that 20% throttle opening area. So from 2,000–3,000 revs, pulling cleanly, so opening the throttle, giving it a bit sort of 20%, 30% throttle. That's picked that up really nicely, so that's going to feel a lot cleaner and sharper accelerating. Once you get past that, it's still 5,000 revs, you're still bleeding that fuel in. We've had to subtract some fuel at the top end of it, so anything above sort of 40%, it's starting to get fuel taken out, which is quite normal for these bikes because they run quite rich at the top.
Right.
That sensing system that I was talking about, a closed loop lambda sensor, that it only works in sort of literally about this area,
right,
where that blue is. So anything past that blue is then pretty much pre-programmed at the factory. So what you get in this block here is what you're going to get all the time, no matter where you are in the world, what bike you've got. So they tend to run them quite rich because then they're safe, because you're going to get variances, you're going to get people that go all over the world, and if they're slightly richer, you've got a bigger cushion. If you're going to run them quite lean, you could get some bikes which are going away and running lean all the time. So that's why you see that sort of split into this blue area where they run them really, really lean, but they've got that sensor protecting them if it needs it. And then above that is where they're going quite rich.
Right.
So yeah, we're actually taking fuel out in places, but the main thing is this is where you ride the bike below sort of 7,000 revs. Below 40% throttle, because remember, if you switch over to this map, this is the throttle map itself. So what you're asking for and what you're getting is two different things. So look here, if you're asking for 8% throttle opening on handlebar, you're only getting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you get 8% throttle.
Right, okay.
So you're never truly getting what you think you're getting.
Right.
But that being said, if you look at like the 3D map, as you hold, if you look here, say for instance, 30% throttle opening, and you're getting 60, as you rev the engine out, it's slowly opening, even though you've got a constant throttle. So 20, 30, 40, and you end up with 45% throttle opening, more than what you're asking for. There is a good reasoning behind that. So if you say, if we take one of these runs, let's say 40% throttle or 20% throttle opening. Take the power off it so much. That torque reading, so that's a constant throttle holding at 20% throttle opening, and you'll see that you get to about 5,000 revs and the torque drops off massively.
Yeah.
And it's because it's quite a big cylinder, and the engine's like a syringe. If you pull a syringe slowly, it fills up with air. If you pull it really fast, as the engine's revving up, it fills up with a lot less air, and consequently the torque drops off. So what they do is you go in here and you can see as you get to about 5,000 revs, it starts to rapidly open to compensate for that fact that the engine's pulling faster and it's not filling up with air. So you get a lot more linear feel to it as opposed to it just literally going bleh. So yeah, that's the reasoning behind that. But yeah, the main thing with yours is that these later MT-09s, they're a lot better at the factory. But saying that, they're now this one's a Euro 4 model, so that's the big change. It's not so much the way the bike runs, the throttle mapping, the ignition, but they've had to really cut down on the fuel, and that's the biggest area on yours where it's had the changes in. Everything else, to be honest, is a lot better than they were on the first generations.
So what's the final sort of?
The final, I mean, it's making what it should make, about 100 horsepower.
At the back wheel.
At the back wheel, where are we? 100 horsepower. That's the power and torque curve. If you look at something like the later runs, so where are we? Like 100% run the fuel in. That red line is where we want to be. And that's spot on now. It's where it needs to be on that red line. So yeah, the next stage now is when you go and ride it on the road, physically ride the bike to see what the throttle feels like. And if it's still got a little bit of regression or it's not quite as smooth as it can be, we then need to go in and start making some more changes. So this is the first stage. The dyno work is more for the fueling. The rest of it needs to be done on the road where you're using it, because you can see it's tied down. You don't really get a feel for what the throttle's behaving like until you ride it, and then you start to know, oh, it's too soft, too aggressive.
So is that the next stage? And is it taking
that's the next stage, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Andy. That's great.
My word. So you join me on the way home along the A47, having had the YamahaTracer remapped at BSD, so that's the third part of the trilogy completed. We've had to change the tyres, had the suspension sorted, and now we've had the engine remapped. And I have to say, what a difference. I've just gone for a blast along the Thorny bypass with it, and the throttle response and the smoothness of the power delivery is just unbelievable. It really is a huge difference from what I had before. Now I know that sometimes in these situations when you've had something like this done, after a few miles it quickly becomes the norm. But I've ridden this for long enough, on the previous setup, and rode round one or two of the problems and sort of pretty much got used to its foibles, if you like. But now I don't have to worry about that because there are no foibles. The smoothness of delivery, the throttle response is just brilliant, and it's just like a different bike. So I'm well pleased. Obviously, the one thing that is concerning me slightly is obviously reliability. I hope that obviously that remains reliable. I'm sure it will do. But other than that, oh, what a difference! It really is night and day, and it just goes to prove, what we have to put up with when bikes go through this Euro 4 malarkey. I know some are affected less or more so than others, but I know that these particular models have been affected quite a lot. Andy was saying, he probably mentioned it in the speech he made to us, while he was going through the information with us, how this later model of Tracer is slightly better actually than the early models, but none the more for that. The low end response is really good. So I'm coming away from there a happy chappy, I have to say. So we've just got a you know, fairly boring ride home now along the A47 and then the 1122 back towards Downham Market. So I think I will call a halt to proceedings here and now. So I do hope you've enjoyed this insight into what's happened today to the old Yamaha, and if you've liked this video, I would hope that you would like and subscribe, because there are a lot more videos coming your way on this channel. So without further ado, this is Shutters and Speed signing off for now, and cheerio!